Hello, this is Al from the Strange and Interesting podcast, and I'm here on the Old Stonebridge Trail leading to the Outagamie County Cemetery. This is a companion video to go along with the podcast episode, so I'll go into a bit more detail in the episode, but for now I just wanted to make a video of the actual cemetery, show you some of the area around it. So the stone bridge that I am on right now, this is the only structure that remains from when the Outagamie County Asylum for the chronic insane was in operation. So it was opened up in 1890, and the goal was to create a self-sufficient asylum along with the farm that was on the property. So started out at like 320 acres, and over the years they bought up more of the land to create the larger farm area. Now, back in those days, there were several ways you could find yourself in the asylum. Not all of them were due to mental illness. Severe alcoholism and even extreme poverty could earn you a ticket to the asylum. And it was almost always a one-way trip. Most of the people who were admitted to the asylum stayed there for the rest of their life. Usually only left in a casket. Now the trail here, there are some signs along the edge, and these signs were funded by several different local organizations and businesses. Tells you a little bit about the cemetery and the asylum. So let's go to the Outagamie County Cemetery and learn a little bit about this forgotten piece of the local history of the Appleton, Wisconsin area. So there was another YouTuber I saw, Ash's Adventures, I believe was the name of the channel, and she referred to it as the Meadow of Lost, or the Meadow of Forgotten Souls, which, as we'll see, is actually very fitting of a name. So it's located right by the Fox Valley Technical College, and they use this area here as an area to train truck drivers. So this is actually like the fourth time I've tried recording this video. First attempt, it wasn't happy with the quality. Second attempt, I accidentally hit the stop record on my phone here. Third one, I found out I made a couple mistakes. Plus it was windy, so winds died down. So hopefully you'll be able to hear me clearly. Now, I don't know if we'll catch any EVPs while I'm out here. I doubt it. I know there have been a couple attempts to record EVPs here. Now, how successful they were, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that this is a hotbed of paranormal activity. You know, certainly not as active as more well-known places like Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Illinois, which is a topic I do hope to cover on a later episode. I've got a friend, Jeff. He has a channel called Quorum 1000. He's actually been there and done a couple videos on Bachelor's Grove, so hope to bring him on the show. So the first superintendent of the Outagamie County Asylum for the Chronic Insane was a man named George Downer. And he did not have a background in mental illness. He had a background in agriculture, which is probably why they brought him on, so he could manage the farming activities. Now, the asylum was actually very profitable in its farming. About 5 years after the asylum opened, they made about $9,000 in profit, which back then would be worth over $240,000 today. Most of the labor was done by the inmates of the asylum because they actually had a very small staff to keep costs down. And any inmates that were deemed physically fit and mentally competent would do the various farm chores, as well as cooking, cleaning, and other mundane day-to-day tasks around the asylum. Things started going downhill for the asylum in 1913. There was a man named John Rayfelt who was admitted to the asylum, and Downer ordered the man to be forcefully castrated, so forced sterilization, even though there really wasn't a reason for it. Now, later that year, his family brought a lawsuit against the asylum, and they not only sued Downer, but they also sued the doctor who performed the procedure, a man named James Canavan, who was the mayor of Appleton at the time. Unfortunately, the case never went to court because Canavan actually died in December of that year, and George Downer would later resign his position as superintendent of the asylum. And the next year, in 2015, he committed suicide by jumping off of a bridge. Now, as far as Rayfelt, he did survive the procedure, and he was released in 1913. Unfortunately, his marriage never recovered. His wife ended up getting a divorce, and a few years later, he ended up back in the asylum. Now, about 2 years after the castration took place, the state of Wisconsin did pass a law making it illegal to involuntarily sterilize someone. Now, after Downer resigned, the asylum was taken over by a man named Thomas Flanagan. And this gave the asylum a new nickname, Flanagan's Funny Farm. Because unfortunately back then, people had some very unflattering name for mental hospitals, insane asylums, Funny Farm, Loony Bin, the Madhouse. And there was actually a bit of disdain for the people who were admitted to these facilities. They were sometimes referred to as inmates, even though they really didn't do any crimes. And unfortunately, also back then, it was not unusual for patients at mental asylums to undergo various treatments like cold water baths and electroshock therapy. And in the case of the Outagamie County Asylum, these procedures were done by people who had no formal training. And they didn't even have on-site medical staff. They relied on traveling doctors. Well, unfortunately, things did not improve under Flanagan. They actually got worse, and there were several reports of inmate abuse, as well as them being overworked and malnourished. Now, the reason Meadow of Forgotten Souls is appropriate is because, as you can see, there's no tombstones. And if an inmate died in the facility, and no one claimed the body. They were buried in this area here. So while we don't have tombstones, we do have some plates just telling you where all the burial rows are. Now, at the entrance to the cemetery, there is that monument you saw that right up there that lists the names of people known to be buried here. I'm not sure if they know specifically where people are. I guess some of the records they kept back then were not good. Now, I read an interview with a woman whose parents used to work at the asylum, and she recalls that there used to be an iron fence around it, but it may have been removed during World War II to salvage the metal to be used in the war effort. Excuse me. So the cemetery here eventually fell into disuse. It became littered, so there probably were vandals. What few tombstones there were ended up being removed. The last one, as I recall, was removed in the 70s because the caretaker of the area actually found it broken and lying up against one of the trees. So since that time, the cemetery fell into disuse and was overgrown. In the 90s, there were plans to build a road through this area, but one of the county executives, his dad actually worked on the farms around here. So he realized that, hey, there's graves here. So that plan was scrapped, and eventually the area here was restored to its current condition by a local organization called Agape of Appleton. So they founded a group called Friends of Outagamie County Cemetery. They do have a Facebook page, but as you can see, they actually did a pretty nice job cleaning up this place. And it is interesting to see the plaques on the side of the road that tell you about what all went on here. You know, so it reminds us of how the way we used to treat the mentally ill wasn't always very pleasant. And while we've certainly come a long way in that regard, unfortunately, sometimes the stigma about mental illness does still remain. So I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Again, check out the Meadow of Forgotten Souls on the Strange and Interesting podcast, and have a wonderful day. The asylum to court because of it. He was given an involuntary castration. And as I believe not too long after this happened, the state of Wisconsin made it illegal to involuntarily castrate someone. And I just felt something on my shoulder, but I know it's not a ghost because I'm standing under a pine tree and I saw that pine cone bounce off my shoulder. So not a paranormal experience.